hardened, but the queen has been overthrown, and I'm not sleeping now. The dark is too hard to beat, and I'm not.
Welcome back, I am the Executioner, and today we are going to be looking at free news stories, and this is X's chopping block. So, let's get right into the story. So, a plane was shot down in Algeria. According to the BBC, quote, the aircraft came down just after taking off from Barouf military airport, west of Algiers. An inquiry is underway into the cause of the crash, Algeria's worst ever air disaster. The government has declared 3 days of national mourning. Most of the dead are army personnel and their families. The Defense Ministry says 10 crew members also died. Passengers from Western Sahara, a disputed territory annexed by Morocco after Spain withdrew in 1975, were among the fatalities. The Polisario Front, which is seeking independence for the territory, is backed by Algeria and says that 30 Western Saharans, including women and children, died. A senior member of Algeria's ruling FLN party said those killed included 26 Polisario members, end quote. So, tragic story that came out of Algeria. About over 257 people dead, it's estimated, according to the BBC. It's very tragic what happened in Algeria. It was a military plane, of course. It wasn't a civilian plane. That would be more egregious and an awful thing that would have happened. But still, terrorism is not justified in trying to accomplish political goals. Just wrapping up the story here, the plane did take off from Barouf military airport west of Algiers, and it was shot down. That's very tragic. I definitely feel for the people whose families were affected by this. Even though I do not know them personally, I believe that they are definitely is tragic. Terrorism is one of those things where it's not a good thing. Now for the second story. The second story is that Mike Zuckerberg is testifying before the Senate. Now, a lot of people have seen memes about this. I'm not referencing a particular article in general, but Mike Zuckerberg did do some very cringy stuff there. A lot of senators did ask him questions about privacy, leak of information that Facebook did in regards to spying on their own users and leaking out information, be it the data breach. It's definitely one of those things you gotta be careful with social media. You can't really trust social media all that much, because the thing is, you are at the mercy of a CEO, or you are at the mercy of somebody who can and will probably leak your information depending on the service, be it if it's Facebook or Twitter. They are notorious for doing such a thing. And I believe, according to the New York Times, that they had got in trouble in 2011 for the same thing. And if they get in trouble again and they're found to be in violation of a lot of these promises and agreements, then they will be fined millions of dollars. So, yeah, Mike Zuckerberg is really gonna have to fight for his life on this one. He is also arguing for the regulation of the social media business, and we all know that Facebook is going downhill. It really is. A lot of people are not going on Facebook now. A lot of kids are going on Discord nowadays. You can actually check out my Discord on It's definitely one of those things where Facebook is becoming the new MySpace. I remember when I was on MySpace years ago. But we all know what's going to happen. Discord, all the new social media services like Gabby, they're going to overtake Facebook, and Facebook does not want this to happen. They want it so Facebook is going to be still there. So the thing is, Facebook will argue for regulation just so new firms can't get into the business and open up new social media websites. That's what regulation does all the time. Business cronies, corporatism, that's what they do. They argue for regulation so they can basically kick out the competition. And that's very screwed up that Mike Zuckerberg is arguing for this under the guise of helping the consumer when he's really just advocating for less choice for the consumer. And that is a very sad thing. It's one of those things where you have to consider that a lot of businesses have done this in the past. They get to such a high position, and then when somebody is coming around the corner, they whine to mommy or daddy government to come fix everything. Same thing happened with the taxi cab companies. Taxi cabs, right? They can't really compete with Uber or Lyft. So what do? They go to the government whining about, oh, they're not licensed, they're not doing this or that. When you could argue taxi drivers shouldn't have those regulations to begin with. So just remove the regulations and you would be able to compete with Uber and Lyft. But no, they advocate for more and more regulation to just stunt competition. And that's the moral of the story here. The second story is that Mark Zuckerberg really can't be trusted on a lot of things. Alrighty, so the first story is about Stoneman Douglas, I believe it is Stoneman Douglas High. The staff at Stoneman Douglas High, the school board, according to an ABC article, quote, Stoneman Education Board rejects arming teachers. Florida lawmakers intended to allow teachers and other in-classroom employees to participate as well, but the program was scaled back amid objections from majority Stoneman survivors. Proponents of the program, including the National Rifle Association, believe it will help combat gun violence on school campuses. Supporters have argued that if he were armed, he may have been able to stop an alleged shooter, Nicholas Cruz, from harming any other students. The school board said in a statement that, quote, funding and allocating for the Coach Aaron Fee's Guardian program should be redirected into Safe Schools allocation in order to provide additional funding for school resource officers, end quote. And end quote from the article. Now, they're arguing about redirecting funds when that district of that school, I will put the link down below, had been given $100 million by, I think it was the Florida state government or the federal government to try to do security measures. So you're just going to throw more money at them and hope they're going to wise up to their senses and have more security? I don't really think that's a bright idea, you know? You already gave them $100 million in the school board pocketed it, and they didn't do anything. And yeah, I think that if that coach had been armed, he would have been able to defend those students. Let's say if you actually train police officers in that district not to be cowards, and the four of them were to go into that building, you know, partner 2 and 2, and search the whole damn school for an intruder, maybe they would have been able to stop that shooting and stop the deaths of 17 students. You know? I think that arming teachers is a great idea. You know why? Because as a student, as somebody who goes to a school, I would feel very safe if I was able to be in a school that had armed resource officers, that had armed teachers, that had basically a safe environment where if everybody has their back, and if where everybody has their back, and if you were to one day, let's say, if there was an intruder, you know, the teachers right there, they're armed to the teeth. They're going to be like, hey, we're not going to let anything happen to you. We're going to protect you to to the death, we're gonna protect you. And I think that I would be way safer. I would feel way safer if that were to be the case in a majority of schools. Because the thing is, the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. And it's been seen hundreds of times. And its statistics actually show it. Over 3 million times a year, guns are used in self-defense, saving countless lives. So, yeah, I think that, in general, we need to arm teachers if they can pass a security background check or a mental health check to make sure that they are not unstable and to make sure that they are not a threat to anybody. So, yeah, I believe that, in general, we should definitely arm teachers with any means necessary. Conceal carry, if they want to conceal carry a knife or a gun or whatever, do it, as long as they pass a background check. Pepper spray? Hell yeah, give them pepper spray, or give them any means they feel comfortable with defending themselves. And that's the moral of this story, that you have to have a means of protecting people. And you have to have a means of protecting children. And if that includes arming teachers, having more resource officers or private security, then you do it. You don't hesitate at that one, because there could be more people harmed because somebody chose to not enact that policy. You know, in general, we gotta remember that the moral of this story is Douglas High is making the wrong decision here, because they are deciding to pour way more money in the resource officers who ignored the pleas of help from the students during that tragedy. They ignored it. 4 of them stood outside doing nothing. I don't think they're qualified in any way to protect students. If I was that police department, I'd definitely fire those 4 people. And you know what I would do if I was that school? I definitely employ private security guards that actually have a motivation to protect the students, as their job is on the line, versus police officers where they can just get away with anything. And yeah, in general, you need to have private security, you need to have armed teachers, you need to have armed staff, so if a messed up kid like this Nicholas Cruz fella walks into another school, let's say, not the real Nicholas Cruz, like somebody like him, then you can have people who are able to defend themselves. You know, it's better to be able to defend yourself than be in a situation where you can't. It's like the old saying, it's better to have it and not need it than not have it and need it. That's general rule. And I think we should be teaching kids like teenagers, how to be able to defend themselves as well. Obviously, you don't give them a gun. That would be obviously not the correct thing to do. You know, like teenagers that are under 18, because, you know, they're not legally adults. So what you do is you train them in self-defense measures. You train them how to fight. Hand to hand. You train them how to disarm somebody, from their rifle or their pistol or whatever. You train them so they're able to disarm a mass shooter, so they can be able to restrain that person. Teach them to be able to use said shooter's, weapon or whatever. Like, don't train them to use it, but train them to know how to point it at that intruder, so that intruder doesn't try to grab it back and, you know, try to harm anybody. You know, train students how to do that if they are like seniors and whatever. Train them how to be smart, how to be able to disarm an opponent, take the intruder's weapon, and be able to hold the intruder up until police arrive. That's the best scenario you can have to prevent these tragedies, as the staff would be armed, the students would be able to disarm the shooter, and would be able to hold the shooter up at gunpoint, so they are not able to escape, and cops can come and do that. Obviously, you train them how to call 911 and say, hey, we have the shooter on the ground, we have his weapon, we are just pointing it at him, fingers off the trigger, so he does not try to grab it and escape. And that's how you prevent these things in general. It's not banning firearms and banning freedoms. It's all about training people how to be smart in these situations, how to avoid getting injured, and how to train them on how to combat certain situations, which is the major thing that can prevent these tragedies. And my heart goes out to the people who were affected by that tragedy. It is very sad what happened to them. Over 17 kids died. One adult as well. That is very sad. And my heart, my thoughts, my prayers absolutely go out to them. But I believe that just because a tragedy happens doesn't mean we should ban fundamental rights that we have. The ability to bear arms. I believe that the smart decision would be training teachers, students, training students how to disarm opponents, and getting more private security, being smart. And that's the moral of the story here, is that we need more private security, trained teachers how to defend themselves, trained students, and armed teachers who are willing to volunteer to protect our kids. And that's the moral of the story today, and I hope you guys like the podcast. It's only like 16 minutes, but whatever. But love you guys. Have an awesome week. Next podcast should be coming out next week, so check out for that one. Watch out for that one. And have a great day. Have a great night wherever you are in this world. And love you guys. Stay safe, stay free, and always remember, you matter.
But the queen has been overthrown.